The deep space survey vessel drifted through the darkness like a silent ghost, its sensors sweeping across the debris field that surrounded the ancient station buried in the void between. STARS Commander Vexilla stood on the bridge of the ship, her crystalline body reflecting the pale blue light from the navigation screens as she studied the readings that made no sense according to any known galactic history. The station ahead was older than anything in the Concordat archives, older than the legendary forerunners who had built the great hyperspace gates, older perhaps than the Concordat itself, which had maintained peace across 70,000 star systems for the past 12 millennia. Commander, we are detecting power signatures, said Rix, the felon science officer whose fur rippled with barely contained excitement as his clawed fingers danced across the sensor controls. That is impossible, Stella replied, her voice carrying the harmonic tones typical of her species when they encountered something that challenged their logical worldview. Agreed. Yet the readings are consistent across all sensor arrays, Rix insisted, his triangular ears twitching as he rechecked the data for the 5th time in as many minutes. The survey team had been exploring this sector for 3 standard months, cataloging dead worlds and collapsed stars for the Concordat's ever-expanding stellar cartography project. When they stumbled upon something that should not exist, the station was massive, easily the size of a small moon, and it orbited a neutron star that had died billions of years before the first Concordat species had even crawled out of their primordial oceans. As they drew closer, the external cameras picked up markings on the hull, symbols and letters in languages that the translation computers struggled to process before finally displaying results that sent a chill through the entire bridge crew. 4 to 7 different extinct languages, all saying variations of the same warning: the humans sleep here and do not wake them. In most ominously final weapon, use only when all hope is lost. What are humans? Asked Kilnax, the Thorian navigator, whose 6 arms moved nervously across his control panels as he maintained their approach. Vector nobody had an answer, because the word itself was not in any historical database, not in any archaeological record, not even in the restricted files that documented the Concordat's darkest periods and forgotten wars. Vexilla made the decision to dock with the station despite the warnings, reasoning that 12,000 years of peace had made the Concordat wise enough to handle whatever mysteries lay within these ancient walls. Dockingport accepted their vessel as if it had been waiting for them, the mechanisms moving smoothly despite eons of disuse, and the airlock cycled open to reveal corridors lined with a soft golden light that had no apparent source. The exploration team consisted of 8 members, each representing different Concordat species, all equipped with standard survey gear and translation devices that would supposedly allow them to interface with any technology they encountered. What they found in the first chamber made them stop and stare in wonder, mixed with growing unease. Rows upon rows of hibernation pods stretched into the distance, thousands of them, perhaps millions, if the chamber extended as far as the sensors suggested, each containing a creature unlike any they had ever seen. The beings inside were bipedal like many spacefaring species, but they possessed no natural armor, no claws, no venomous sacs, no redundant organs that would mark them as survivors of harsh evolutionary pressures. They looked fragile, almost delicate, with smooth skin in various shades of brown and pink and tan, with hair growing only on their heads in different colors and textures. These cannot be weapons, Rick said, pressing his paw against one of the pods to peer more closely at the sleeping figure within. A female specimen, according to the pod's display, with dark skin and tightly coiled hair. Perhaps the warning refers to something else, suggested Mira, the Vorhan medical officer whose tentacles were already extending toward her portable scanner. Eager to collect biological data, they spent hours documenting the chamber, taking scans and recordings, noting the efficiency of the stasis systems that had kept these creatures alive for an incomprehensible span of time. It was on the central control platform that Stella found the designation plaque, written in Old Concordat standard, a language that had not been used for over 8,000 years, but which the translation matrix could still process. Strategic Deterrent Installation Game 7, she read aloud. her voice echoing in the vast chamber. Personnel count: 2,400,000,000 souls. Clearance level: Omega Black Activation Protocol. Total extinction event: the numbers were staggering, the implications terrifying. And suddenly, the warnings made a horrible kind of sense. These were not just hibernating beings, they were a weapon system. One designed to activate only under the most dire circumstances imaginable. "We should leave," Kilnack said, his multiple arms crossing over his chest in a gesture of extreme discomfort. "We should report this immediately to the Concordat Council." But Rix was already at one of the control stations, his natural curiosity overriding his caution as he interfaced with systems that responded to his touch as if they had been waiting for. "Millennia, there are records here," he said, his voice tight with excitement and fear. "Historical files. Mission briefings, personal logs. Commander, I think I can access them." Vextala should have stopped him then. Should have followed protocol and sealed the station until a proper research team with military escort could be assembled, but she was Crosian, a species built on logic and the pursuit of knowledge. And the mystery before her was too compelling to ignore. "Proceed," she ordered. And with those words set in motion events that would change the galaxy forever. The first file that Rix opened was a video log. Grainy and degraded by time, but still viewable, showing one of the sleeping beings in military uniform, standing before a camera with eyes that held depths of sorrow that transcended species. "This is Captain Sarah Chen. Service number 7743 Deltanine. Recording final log entry before entering stasis," the being said. And the translation matrix rendered her words in perfect Concordat standard to whoever finds this facility. "Know that we did not choose this path lightly. We were once a peaceful species. Explorers and dreamers, artists and scientists." Then the void chorus came. "And we learned that sometimes peace must be defended by those willing to become monsters. We transformed ourselves, all of us, into weapons capable of fighting an enemy that devoured reality itself. We won. But the cost was our humanity in every sense that mattered. We cannot be allowed to walk free in the galaxy. We saved, we are too dangerous. Too broken, too perfectly designed for killing, so we sleep, waiting for the day when the darkness returns." Hoping that day never comes, the recording ended, and the bridge crew stood in silence, trying to process what they had just witnessed. "What was the void chorus?" Mira asked quietly. Nobody answered, because deep in their genetic memories, in the oldest parts of their evolutionary history, every species in the Concordat carried faint echoes of a time of terror, of something vast and hungry that had nearly consumed everything. They had always attributed these racial nightmares to natural evolutionary pressures, never imagining they might be inherited memories of a real threat. "We need to wake one of them," Rick said suddenly. "We need to understand what they are. What they can do that would be monumentally foolish," Vexilla countered. But even as she spoke, she knew her curiosity would override her caution. They chose carefully, selecting a pod marked with command insignia. The same Captain Sarah Chin who had recorded the final log. The revival process took 6 hours, the pod system slowly bringing its occupant back from a sleep that had lasted 10 million years. When Sarah Chun's eyes finally opened, they were clear and alert, taking in her surroundings with a tactical assessment that spoke of deep military training. Shay looked at the aliens surrounding her pod, smiled with what might have been sadness or relief or both, and spoke her first words in a dead language that the translator took a moment to process. "So it has returned." She said. "The void chorus is coming back. How much time do we have?" Sarah Chen sat on the edge of the examination table in the medical bay, wearing a borrowed jumpsuit that hung loosely on her small frame while the alien scientists circled her with their instruments and scanners. 10 million years of sleep had left her body stiff, but surprisingly functional, the stasis technology having preserved her down to the cellular level with precision that made the Concordat's best medical minds envious and afraid. "In equal measure, you keep asking me what I am," Sarah said, watching Mira's tentacles wave scanning devices around her head. "But you should be asking what I was." Bexila stood in the corner of the room. her crystalline form refracting the medical bay's lights into rainbow patterns on the walls. As she observed the human with growing concern, the creature before her seemed harmless, even friendly, answering questions with patience and occasionally making sounds that the translator identified as laughter, yet something in those brown eyes spoke of experiences that would shatter most beings, of things seen and done that left permanent marks on the soul. Please explain, Vexila said, her harmonic voice carrying undertones of genuine curiosity. Sarah was quiet for a moment, gathering her thoughts or perhaps deciding how much truth these aliens could handle. My species evolved on a world we called Earth, she began. We were nothing special by galactic standards, no natural weapons, no thick hides, no redundant organs. What we had was stubbornness and adaptability and a talent for problem solving that bordered on obsessive. We reached the stars slowly, carefully, and found a galaxy teeming with life. Rix leaned forward from his position near the door, his feline features intent with fascination. The Concordat has no records of Earth or humans in any historical. The database. Sarah's smile was sad, knowing that was intentional. We erased ourselves from history because we knew what we had become. She stood and walked to the viewport, looking out at the starfield beyond with eyes that had seen these same stars when they occupied different positions in the sky for 2,000 years. We built a peaceful confederation of species, she continued. We called it the First Concordat, and it spanned most of this galactic arm. We had our conflicts, our disagreements, but nothing we couldn't resolve through diplomacy and compromise. Then the Void Chorus arrived. The temperature in the room seemed to drop as Sarah spoke those words, and several of the Concordat crew members shifted uncomfortably. What is the Void Chorus? Mira asked, her translator struggling with the tremor in her voice. Sarah turned to face them, and for the first time saw something dark and deadly flicker across her expression. Imagine something that exists between dimensions, something that feeds on reality itself, consuming matter and energy and thought and leaving nothing but emptiness in its wake. It doesn't communicate, doesn't negotiate, doesn't want anything except to unmake everything that exists. When it came to our galaxy, entire civilizations vanished overnight. Worlds went silent mid-transmission. Fleet after fleet disappeared without sending so much as a distress call. Vextala accessed her historical databases, searching for any reference to such an event, and found only the barest hints buried in the oldest fragments of pre-Concordat mythology. Stories of the Great Silence, of the Time of Forgetting, dismissed by modern scholars as primitive explanations for natural disasters or data corruption in ancient records. We fought it for 300 years. Her voice flat and emotionless in the way of soldiers recounting trauma. We lost 98% of the first Concordat's population. Every strategy failed. Every weapon proved useless. Every brilliant plan ended in annihilation. The Void Chorus was simply beyond our capacity to fight using conventional methods. She walked back to the examination table and sat down, looking suddenly tired despite her recent awakening. So we did something desperate. Something that none of us wanted, but all of us knew was necessary. We decided to transform our entire species into a weapon. Kilnax made a choking sound, his 6 arms wrapping around himself in horror. Your entire species. Not all at once. Sarah clarified, it took us 50 years to develop the technology and another 100 to implement it fully. We called it the militarization protocol, genetic rewriting, cybernetic enhancement, neural restructuring, psychological conditioning. We took everything that made us human and weaponized it. Our pattern recognition became tactical analysis systems. Our social cooperation became hive mind combat coordination. Our tool-using intelligence became the ability to turn any environment into a weapon. Rix was frantically taking notes on his datapad, his paws shaking slightly. But you still look human. He observed the changes you described should be visible. Sarah laughed. But there was no humor in it. These bodies are our sleep forms. Our dormant state. When we activate for combat, we become something very different. Something that scared us more than the Void Chorus ever did. She stood and approached the viewport again, staring at her reflection in the transparent aluminum. We fought the Void Chorus for another 70 years after the militarization was complete. She said softly. We learned to hurt it. To push it back? To destroy its manifestations before they could fully enter our dimension? We paid for every victory with millions of lives. But we paid willingly, because we knew we were saving trillions more when we finally drove it beyond the galactic rim. When we sealed the dimensional rifts it had used to enter our space, we were the only ones left. Every other species in the first Concordat was extinct. Vextella felt something cold settle in her core. A realization that was almost too terrible to accept. You were saying the Concordat we know, the civilization that has existed for 12,000 years, is built on the ruins of your victory? Yes, Sarah confirmed. We stayed awake long enough to help the surviving primitive species rebuild. To give them the technology and knowledge they would need to create a stable galactic civilization, then we erased every record of humanity from the databases, scrubbed every mention of the Void Chorus from history, and put ourselves to sleep in facilities like this one. We left behind only the vaguest warnings. Hoping they would be enough to keep people away, Myra's tentacles coiled and uncoiled with agitation. Why? She demanded. Why hide what you had done? Why erase such a magnificent achievement? Sarah turned to face them, and her eyes held a weight that made even Vextella, his logical mind, recoil because we were not heroes. Shh, she said quietly. We were monsters who had done monstrous things for a righteous cause. We had optimized ourselves so completely for killing that we could not exist in a peaceful galaxy without becoming a threat to everything we had fought to save. Better to sleep and let the galaxy forget us than to risk becoming. The very thing we had defeated. The medical bay was silent except for the soft hum of equipment and the distant vibration of the ships. Engines. Then why did you wake me? Sarah asked, looking directly at Vextella. Crosian Commander felt the question like a physical blow, because she knew the answer even before Sarah continued. You woke me because you detected something. The human said, your sensors picked up signatures that your databases flagged as anomalous, energy patterns that shouldn't exist, dimensional fluctuations that have no natural explanation. Vextella accessed her ship's sensor logs, pulling up data from their approach to the system, readings she had dismissed as equipment malfunction or stellar, phenomena viewed through the lens of what Sarah had just told them. The readings told a very different and terrifying story. How long? Vextella asked, her harmonic voice breaking into discordant frequencies. Sarah closed her eyes, and when she opened them again, they held the look of a soldier preparing for a war she had hoped would never come based on the readings. I am seeing in your ship's logs. I would estimate we have 6 months before the Void Chorus Vanguard reaches inhabited space. Maybe less if they have grown stronger during their exile. She walked toward the door, moving with a purpose and confidence that belied her recent awakening. Take me to your leaders. She said, I need to explain what is coming and what it will take to stop it, and then I need to wake up my people, all 2 billion of them, because the peace your Concordat has enjoyed is about to end. As they made their way to the bridge to prepare for the journey to the Concordat capital, Rix pulled Vextella aside. Are we certain we should be doing this? He whispered, everything in my instincts says we are unleashing something we cannot control. Vextella looked back at Sarah, who was studying the ship's navigation charts with the easy competence of someone who had commanded vessels far more advanced than their survey ship. We unleashed it the moment we woke her. Vextella replied, now we can only hope that she was telling the truth about her purpose, and pray that the Concordat is wise enough to accept the help of monsters. The Concordat Grand Council Chamber was a marvel of architectural achievement, a sphere of transparent crystal, floating in the center of a massive tower that rose from the surface of Primus. Phelan, like a needle piercing the sky. Representatives from all 70,000 member systems gathered here in person or via holographic projection, creating a sea of alien forms that would have overwhelmed most beings with its sheer diversity. Sarah Chen stood in the center of the speaking platform, wearing a formal military uniform that she had fabricated from the patterns stored in her neural implants, looking impossibly small and fragile, surrounded by creatures that towered over her or possessed natural weapons that could tear her apart. Yet when she spoke, her voice carried clearly through the translation systems. And every being in the chamber fell silent to listen. Honored counselors, she began, using the formal address protocols that had apparently survived relatively unchanged across 10 million years. I'm Captain Sarah Chen of the Human Defense Initiative, and I am here to warn you about an enemy you have forgotten, but who has not forgotten you. She activated the holographic projector built into the platform, and images filled the air above the council, recordings from the war against the Void Chorus that humanity had preserved with meticulous care, worlds cracking open like eggs as reality itself unraveled. Fleets of ships dissolving into nothing as dimensional barriers failed. Entire star systems going dark. As the chorus consumed everything within them, many of the counselors recoiled from the images. Some crying out in fear or denial. Others sitting in stunned silence as their racial memories stirred with recognition of nightmares they had thought were just evolutionary shadows. This is the Void Chorus, Sarah continued, her voice steady. Despite the chaos her presentation had created, it came to this galaxy 10 million years ago, and nearly destroyed all life before my people stopped it. We drove it beyond the galactic rim and sealed the dimensional rifts it used to enter our space, but we did not destroy it. Because we could not destroy something that exists partially outside of reality as we understand it. High Counselor Thrain, a massive crowvar whose scales rippled with bioluminescent patterns indicating deep skepticism, rose from his seat. You claim your species defeated an enemy that our records suggest is nothing more than ancient mythology. His voice boomed through the chamber. Yet you also claim to have erased all evidence of your existence. How convenient that we must simply take your word for these extraordinary claims. Sarah did not flinch. Under his gaze, I am not asking you to take my word, she replied. I am asking you too, look at your own sensor data from the galactic rim. She pulled up readings that had been flooding into the Concordat's monitoring stations for the past 3 months. Anomalies that the scientists had been struggling to explain, dimensional fractures, energy signatures that violated known physics, and most damning, a slow but steady increase in the disappearance of automated research outposts along the outer edge of colonized space. These are the same patterns we observed when the Void Chorus first arrived. Sarah explained. It probes the barriers between dimensions, looking for weak points, and when it finds them, it begins sending through scouts. Your outposts are not malfunctioning or suffering equipment failure. They are being unmade, removed from existence so completely that you cannot even detect that they are gone. Vexala, who had been granted special dispensation to attend the council session, stepped forward to support Sarah's testimony. I have verified the historical data Captain Chen provided against our oldest archaeological records. The Crozian said there are gaps in our history, periods where entire civilizations simply vanish with no explanation. The timing matches exactly with what she has described. The council erupted into argument, voices rising in dozens of languages as representatives demanded answers, proposed solutions, or simply denied that any of this could be real. Sarah waited patiently for the chaos to die down, standing perfectly still in a way that suggested military discipline so ingrained it had become unconscious. Finally, Counselor Mirax of the Velian Collective, a species known for their logical approach to crisis management, spoke up. Assume for the moment that we accept your warning as genuine, she said, her multiple vocal cords creating harmonics that the translators rendered as cool professionalism. What exactly are you proposing we do about this threat? Sarah took a deep breath, and for the first time since entering the chamber, she allowed her expression to show the weight of what she was about to say. I am proposing a joint military operation. She stated the Concordat will provide logistical support, intelligence, and defensive forces to protect civilian populations. My people will provide the offensive capability needed to engage and drive back the Void Chorus before it can establish a foothold in our dimension. How many of your people are we discussing? Asked High Counselor Thrain. 2,400,000,000. Combat optimize humans across 17 strategic deterrent installations throughout the Perseus Arm. Sarah replied without hesitation. The chamber fell absolutely silent as the counselors processed that number. That is more soldiers than our entire Concordat defense force. Thrain said slowly, and you describe them as combat optimized. What does that mean in practical terms? Sarah's expression became carefully neutral. The look of someone preparing to reveal a truth they knew would cause fear. It means that when we activate our combat protocols, we become something that evolution never intended and that nature would reject if it could. Each human soldier is capable of operating independently or as part of a networked consciousness that allows tactical coordination across light years. We can adapt to any environment, improvise weapons from any available materials, and process battlefield information at speeds that make modern AI seem sluggish. We heal from injuries that would be fatal to most species. We can function for days without sleep or food. And we have been psychologically conditioned to view warfare as the highest purpose we can serve. She paused. Letting that sink in before continuing, we are not heroes from your legends. Counselors, we are weapons that happen to remember being people. And we are very, very good at killing things that should not be killed. Rix, watching from the observer gallery, felt his fur stand on end as he finally understood what the warnings on the installation had truly meant. These humans were not just dangerous, they were apex predators who had transcended biology itself to become pure function. Purpose without limitation, will without conscience, and you expect us to simply unleash you into our galaxy? Demanded Counselor Sarith of the Thal Imperium, her crystalline body chiming with agitation, to trust that you will return to sleep once the threat is ended. Sarah met her gaze without flinching. No, she said quietly, I expect you to watch us very carefully and to be prepared to destroy every human installation. If we give you any reason to believe we have become the monsters we were designed to be, I expect you to demand regular reports, to maintain oversight of our operations, and to never, ever trust us completely, because we do not even trust ourselves. The honesty of that statement seemed to shake the council more than anything else Sarah had said. Here was a being offering them salvation while simultaneously warning them that the cure might be worse than the disease. Want to see a demonstration? High Counselor Thrain announced before we commit to any alliance. I want to see what your people are actually capable of. Sarah nodded, as if she had expected this request. I can arrange that, agreed. But I warn you now, once you see us in our true form, you will never look at us the same way again. Some knowledge cannot be unknown. Some sights cannot be unseen. I accept those terms, Thrain replied 3 weeks later. A small contingent of counselors and military observers gathered in a designated testing zone in an uninhabited system. Sarah had awakened a single squad of 12 human soldiers, and they stood in formation on the observation platform. Looking deceptively normal in their dormant state, begin the demonstration. Thrain ordered. Sarah gave a hand signal, and the 12 humans activated their combat protocols simultaneously. The transformation was both subtle and profound. Their bodies did not dramatically change shape, but something fundamental shifted in the way they moved, the way they held themselves, the way their eyes tracked potential threats with predatory focus. They spread out across the testing ground. And what followed was a masterclass in efficient violence that left the observers shaken. Humans dismantled combat drones designed to challenge entire platoons of Concordat soldiers. Using nothing but standard equipment and their terrifying ability to coordinate and adapt, they fought as if they shared a single mind, movement flowing into the next, creating cascading sequences of action that turned the battlefield into a geometry of death. When a heavily armored target was introduced, they improvised shaped charges from mining equipment in under 2 minutes and destroyed it with surgical precision. When the test administrators activated a simulation of void chorus energy signatures, the humans' demeanor changed from professionally lethal to something far more intense. They moved with a cold fury that suggested deep personal hatred, eliminating the simulated threats with an efficiency that bordered on artistry. The first engagement between the Void Chorus and the combined Concordat human defense force occurred in the Outer Reach sector, a sparsely populated region of mining colonies and research outposts that had the misfortune of lying directly in the path of the interdimensional invasant. Fexel commanded the Concordat fleet from her flagship, a massive dreadnought called the Eternal Vigilance. while Sarah coordinated the human forces from the Tactical Operations Center that had been hastily established aboard the vessel. The contrast between the two command styles was immediately apparent and profoundly disturbing to anyone. Observing the operations, the Concordat forces moved with practiced precision, following established doctrine and responding to threats according to training manuals that had been refined over thousands of years of peacekeeping operations. The human forces moved like living fluid, adapting and flowing around obstacles, creating solutions that seemed to violate basic tactical principles yet somehow worked with devastating effectiveness. Void Chorus Harvester emerging from Dimensional Rift, the sensor officer announced, her voice tight with barely controlled fear matching. Known profiles from historical data estimated mass, 400,000 metric tons energy signature, off the scale the harvester was a nightmare made manifest. A writhing mass of geometry that hurt to look at directly because it existed in more dimensions than the human eye was designed to process it. It began pulling matter into itself, unmaking asteroids and small moons with casual indifference as it oriented toward the nearest inhabited world. Concordat fleet maintain defensive perimeter around the colony world. Vexthela ordered all ships prepare to engage with main battery's human forces. You are cleared to engage the harvester. Sarah's response was calm and almost casual. Acknowledged, Striker Team 7. You have the target, make it quick. On Vexthela's tactical display, 12 human vessels broke from formation and accelerated toward the harvester at speeds that should have liquefied their crews from the G4. Chesty ships were small, barely corvette-sized, and their weapons seemed laughably inadequate compared to the massive enemy before them. What followed was a lesson in warfare that the Concordat observers would never forget. The human ships did not engage in traditional combat, did not exchange fire from a distance, or attempt to overwhelm the harvester with superior numbers. Instead, they wove between the dimensional distortions surrounding the enemy vessel, moving with impossible precision through spaces where physics itself was breaking down. They deployed weapons that the Concordat scientists struggled to classify, devices that seemed to manipulate fundamental forces in ways that conventional technology could not replicate. When the harvester attempted to unmake one of the human ships, the vessel simply adjusted its quantum state and phased through the attack as if it were not even there. The battle lasted 7 minutes, and at the end of it, the Void Chorus Harvester collapsed into itself and vanished as whatever allowed it to exist in their dimension was systematically dismantled by human weapons. 12 human ships. Not a single casualty against an enemy that historical records suggested should have required entire fleets to even slow down by the founders. Breathed Counselor Thrain, who was observing from the bridge. They make it look easy. It is not easy, Sarah replied quietly, her eyes never leaving the tactical display. Every one of those pilots is running combat algorithms that would burn out a standard neural network in seconds. They are operating at cognitive speeds that leave them exhausted for days afterward. They just make it look easy because that is what we designed them to do. The campaign continued for weeks, with Void Chorus incursions appearing across a dozen sectors as the enemy probed the galactic defenses looking for weaknesses. The human forces responded to each incursion with the same brutal efficiency, destroying harvester after harvester while suffering minimal casualties. But Vexthela noticed something troubling as she spent more time working alongside Sarah. The human captain was changing, becoming harder and more distant. With each engagement, the easy smile and patient explanations were replaced by terse orders and a coldness that suggested Sarah was retreating into the combat mindset that had been burned into her neural architecture millions of years ago. Are you well? Vexthela asked during a brief lull between battles. They were standing in the observation lounge, watching a human fleet conduct training exercises that looked more like a synchronized dance than military maneuver. Sarah was quiet for a long moment before answering. I am becoming what I was designed to be, she said softly. The longer we fight, the more the combat optimization takes over. I can feel myself losing pieces of who I was before the militarization, letting go of memories and emotions that might interfere with tactical efficiency. She turned to look at Vexilla, and the Crozian saw something like desperation in those brown eyes. "This is why we put ourselves to sleep," Sarah continued, "because we knew that every battle would take us further from humanity and closer to being nothing but weapons. I am fighting to save your civilization while simultaneously losing the ability to understand why that matters." The confession shook Vexilla deeply. But before she could respond, alarms blared throughout the ship, massive void chorus presence detected in the Thalen system. The communications officer announced multiple Harvester-class vessels and what appears to be a coordinator entity. Planetary shields are failing. Vexilla felt her crystalline structure resonate with shock. Primus Thalen was the Concordat capital, home to 8 billion souls and the heart of galactic governance, all available forces. Set course for Primus Thalen. She commanded maximum emergency speed. Sarah was already moving toward the command center, her expression transforming into the cold tactical focus that Vexilla had learned to both admire and fear. "How long until we arrive?" Sarah asked. 6 hours at maximum speed," the navigation officer replied. "We will not make it in time," Sarah said, her voice flat and certain the planet will fall in for hours unless we do something desperate. She pulled up star charts and began calculating trajectories within human speed, her fingers dancing across holographic controls faster than most beings could think. "I need authorization to activate emergency protocol, Omega." Sarah announced. Vexil felt a chill run through her entire being because she had read about Protocol Omega in the human military documentation. It was the option of absolute last resort, the thing humanity had created for situations where normal victory was impossible. What does that protocol entail? Counselor Thrain demanded. Sarah met his gaze without flinching. "It means I wake up everyone." She stated all 2,400,000,000 human soldiers simultaneously, and we use techniques that will devastate our own forces to ensure the enemy is stopped. It means accepting casualties in the hundreds of millions to save billions. It means I am asking you to let me turn my people into a living shield around your homeworld. The bridge went absolutely silent as everyone processed what Sarah was proposing. "You were talking about deliberate sacrifice," Vexilla said, her voice breaking into discordant harmonics. "You are asking permission to throw away millions of lives." "I am asking permission to let my people do what we were created to do," Sarah replied. "Those soldiers sleeping in the installations know this might be required of them. They accepted it when they underwent militarization, and they will accept it now." "Gah! But I need your authorization because I will not make this decision alone." Thrain looked at Vexilla, at Sarah, at the tactical display showing Primus Thalen's shields, flickering and failing under the void chorus assault. He closed his massive eyes and took a breath that seemed to shake his entire body. "Authorized," he said quietly. "May the Founders forgive us all." Sarah's hands moved across the controls with terrible purpose, sending activation codes to every human installation in the Perseus arm within minutes. Billions of soldiers were waking from their ancient sleep, receiving their orders, and preparing for deployment. The human fleet that emerged from hyperspace above Primus Thalen was beyond anything the Concordat had imagined. Thousands of ships of all sizes, from small fighters to massive carriers, all moving with the unified purpose of a single organism. The Void Chorus forces were already inside the planetary shields, their harvester ships beginning the process of unmaking the capital city, while the coordinator entity, a massive tier in reality itself, directed the assault from high orbit. Sarah did not hesitate, did not pause to calculate acceptable losses or consider alternative strategies. All forces, she broadcast on every channel, formed defensive sphere around the planet. Absorb and redirect all incoming attacks. Under no circumstances do you allow anything to reach the surface. What followed was called the Primus Miracle by those who survived it, though Sarah would later describe it simply as doctrine being properly executed. Human forces positioned themselves between the Void Chorus and the planet, creating a living barrier of ships and soldiers who intercepted attacks meant to destroy the world below. They used their bodies, their ships, their very quantum states as shields, absorbing dimensional tears and reality warps that should have annihilated everything in their path. 30. 1,000 humans died in the first hour as they threw themselves into attacks that no armor could withstand. 6 months after the Battle of Primus Thalon, the Void Chorus threat had been contained and pushed back beyond the galactic rim for what the human tactical analysis suggested would be at least another several million years. The cost had been high. 300,000 human soldiers dead, dozens of Concordat worlds damaged, and an entire generation of galactic citizens who would grow up with nightmares of dimensional horrors and the terrifying saviors who had defended them. Sarah Chen stood in the Garden of Remembrance on Primus Thalon, a vast memorial park that had been created to honor those who had fallen during the war. 300,000 trees had been planted, one for each human soldier who had died, their DNA encoded into the genetic structure of the plants, so that in a very real sense, the defenders would become part of the world they had saved. Vextala found her there at dawn, standing before a particular tree that bore a small plaque with a name, Lieutenant Marcus Chen, Striker Team 7, your brother? The Crozian asked gently. Sarah nodded, her hand resting on the smooth bark. My twin. Actually, she said quietly, we went through militarization together, slept in adjacent pods for 10 million years, and he died in the first wave of the Primus defense. I watched his ship disintegrate on the tactical display and continued giving orders. Because that was what the situation required. She turned to face Vextala, and the crystalline being saw that. Sarah's eyes were different than they had been at the start of the war. Something had changed. Some fundamental piece of her had either broken or been reforged into a new shape. I cannot do this anymore, Sarah stated. I cannot be this thing I was made to be and still call myself human in any meaningful sense. The war has reminded me what we sacrificed, and I find that I am tired of the sacrifice. Vextala had been expecting this conversation, had seen Sarah becoming more withdrawn and isolated as the fighting continued, pulling away from the other humans as if their very presence reminded her of what she had become. What do you want to do? Vextala asked. Sarah looked up at the sky where the sun was rising over the capital city, painting the clouds in shades of gold and pink that were remarkably similar to the sunrises on Earth that she remembered from her life before militarization. I want to propose a new arrangement, she said, one that allows my people to serve their purpose without losing themselves completely in the process. The proposal Sarah brought before the Concordat Grand Council 3 weeks later was radical and unprecedented, but it carried the weight of hard-won wisdom from a species that had learned the true cost of perpetual warfare. We will become the Sentinels, Sarah explained to the assembled counselors. The vast majority of human military forces will return to stasis in our installations, maintained in a state of readiness, but not actively deployed. We will wake only when threats arise that the Concordat cannot handle through conventional means. Each installation will have a small cadre of volunteers who remain awake on rotating shifts, serving as liaisons and maintaining the facilities. These volunteers will slowly undergo genetic reversion therapy, a process that will take decades but will eventually restore them to baseline human physiology. Counselor Thrain, who had become one of humanity's strongest advocates after witnessing the Battle of Primus Thalon, leaned forward in his seat. And what prevents your people from simply remaining awake and demanding a place in the Concordat? He asked, not accusingly, but with genuine curiosity. Sarah's smile was sad, but genuine. Nothing prevents it except our own understanding of what we are, she replied. We have seen what happens when we stay active for too long. We become colder, harder, more machine than person. Most of my soldiers would rather sleep than lose the last fragments of their humanity to endless vigilance. They want to know that their sacrifice meant something, that they saved a galaxy that could thrive without them. Counselor Mirax of the Velian Collective spoke up, her multiple vocal cords creating harmonics of concern. This places tremendous trust in your species' ability to maintain discipline across millions of years. She observed what happens if future humans decide they no longer wish to serve as sleeping guardians. Sarah had clearly anticipated this question because her answer came without hesitation. Then you destroy us, she stated flatly. We will provide you with the locations of every installation, the access codes to our command systems, and the technical specifications needed to eliminate our entire species. If we ever become a threat, we will accept Concordat observers and inspectors at any time, grant you complete transparency into our operations, and submit to whatever oversight you deem necessary. The chamber erupted into discussion as counselors debated the implications of Sarah's proposal. Some argued that humanity deserved full citizenship and integration into the Concordat, that their service had earned them a place among the stars. Others worried that even sleeping humans represented a potential threat, that allowing such a powerful military force to exist in standby mode was inviting future disaster. It was Vexilla who ultimately swayed the debate, stepping forward to address the council with the authority of someone who had fought alongside humanity and understood them better than perhaps any other Concordat. Citizen, I have studied human history extensively over the past months. She began both their ancient past before militarization and their recent actions during the war. What I've learned is that humanity's greatest strength is not their combat capabilities or their technological innovations. It is their capacity for self-sacrifice, their willingness to bear burdens that would break other species, so that those species might live free of those burdens. They are offering us the ultimate gift: protection without dominion, strength without conquest, guardianship without control. To reject this offer would be to insult the memory of those 300,000 who died defending our homeworld. The vote was not unanimous, but it passed with a strong majority, and the framework for what would become known as the Sentinel Covenant was established. Human installations would remain active, but minimally staffed, their vast armies sleeping in stasis until needed. The Concordat would maintain oversight and provide support, treating the installations as sovereign territory, but with agreed-upon protocols for inspection and communication. Human who wished to leave the Sentinel program would be granted full Concordat citizenship and assistance with reintegration into civilian life. On the day the covenant was formally ratified, Sarah stood with Vexilla on the observation deck of a newly christened station, the Sentinel Watch headquarters. Positioned in orbit around Primus Thalon as a symbol of the bond between humanity and the Concordat, you know that I am staying awake, Sarah said, watching the installation's massive hangar bays seal shut as the reversion to stasis began. I cannot go back to sleep knowing what is out there, knowing that the Void Chorus might return. I know, Vexilla replied, and I am glad, because the Concordat will need voices like yours to help guide the relationship between our peoples. I have been appointed as commander of the Sentinel Watch. The Crosian continued, my first official act is to offer you the position of Chief Human Liaison. Together, we can ensure that the sacrifice your people made continues to mean something. Sarah considered the offer, knowing it would mean decades of genetic reversion therapy, years of slowly becoming less weapon and more person, a lifetime spent bridging to civilizations that had such different understandings of peace and war. I accept, she said finally, but only on one condition. Name it, Vexilla responded. You have to promise me that you will work every single day to make us unnecessary. Sarah stated that you will build a Concordat so strong, so wise, so capable that my people can sleep forever and never need to wake, that you will create a galaxy where the only use for weapons is as museum pieces. Vexella's crystalline form chimed softly, the sound that her species made when experiencing profound emotion. I promise, she said, though I suspect that goal will take longer than either of us will live to see. Then we had better get started, Sarah replied with a smile that held genuine warmth for the first time since her awakening in the years that followed. The Sentinel Covenant proved remarkably successful. Human installations remained sealed, their billions of soldiers sleeping dreamlessly, while the galaxy above them slowly forgot the details of the war and remembered only that they had been saved. A small community of humans remained awake, perhaps 10,000 individuals scattered across the 17 installations, serving as caretakers and liaisons while undergoing the slow process of genetic reversion. Sarah Chen became a fixture at Concordat Council meetings, her insights into threat assessment and defensive strategy helping to strengthen the military forces that would hopefully mean her people never needed to wake. She watched her hair turn gray, felt her reflexes slow as the combat optimizations were gradually removed from her genetics, and celebrated each small step back toward baseline. Humanity as a victory against the militarization that had defined her species Vexilla remained her closest friend and ally. The two of them forming a partnership that became legendary within the Concordat, the weapon who chose to become a person and the scholar who learned to think like a soldier.